What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy. Welcome back to our Bible study. Okay. So, now we're looking at Deuteronomy chapter 3. We read chapters 1 and 2 before, and so far it's been Moses sort of recapping what's been going on between, leaving Egypt and where they are now. Yeah. Deuteronomy chapter 3 seems to be continuing the sort of recap that Moses is giving the people of Israel. I did peek ahead just a little bit to chapter 4, and it seems like that's where he's actually going to start adding new things. So, seems like we're ending the recap with this chapter. But if you've been keeping up with the Bible study so far, a lot of this is going to sound familiar, with possible slight other details added in. So anyway, here we go. Deuteronomy chapter 3. Next we turned and headed for the land of Bashan, where King Og and his entire army attacked us at Edrei. But the Lord told me, "Do not be afraid of him, for I have given you victory over Og and his entire army, and I will give you all his land. Treat him just as you treated King Sihon of the Amorites, who ruled in Heshbon." Okay, so when it says next we turned, and that was pretty much right after they had fought King Sihon and the Amorites. So that's what just preceded this in the event recap. So just for the context of when he's saying next. Otherwise, yeah, kind of a similar situation. They encounter resistance. God says, "Don't be afraid, because I am going to give you victory here." So then, verse 3. So the Lord our God handed King Og and all his people over to us, and we killed them all. Not a single person survived. We conquered all 60 of his towns, the entire Argob region in his kingdom of Bashan. Not a single town escaped our conquest. These towns were all fortified with high walls and barred gates. We also took many unwalled villages at the same time. We completely destroyed the kingdom of Bashan, just as we had destroyed King Sihon of Heshbon. We destroyed all the people in every town we conquered, men, women, and children alike. But we kept all the livestock for ourselves, and took plunder from all the towns. So, little bit of extra detail there that I'm not quite recalling. A, there being 60 towns, and B, that multiple of them were highly fortified. Which pretty much just adds to the overall kind of potential that there was for difficulty in these battles, and yet God was with them and they were victorious. Of course, having 60 towns, depending on how spread out they are and how many people are in each, that could actually, in a way, make the battling slightly easier than if all of said people were, packed together in one town. And, as for getting rid of all the people, I mean, it was at least my kind of assumption is in most of these situations, especially when it feels like they're just going for complete, utter destruction, no survivors, any of that. It usually kind of goes back to God not wanting them to intermingle too much with and therefore be influenced by the other peoples of these regions, so that they don't end up, being tempted to worship other gods, beings, whatever you want to call them. Like what happened when they were seduced and, led astray by the Moabite women. And I guess there were Midianite women involved too. At least one of them was the daughter of like a captain or chief or somebody like that. So, God not wanting his people to be led astray, it was quite common in this phase of, the Israelites' history for them to just completely wipe out all the people. And let me just... So the footnote there, destroyed, is probably much like previous ones that we've read, previous footnotes we've read at that same word, where it's talking about complete consecration of things or people to the Lord. And I kind of wish I had a bit better of an idea, maybe of the original Hebrew or something like that, so it would, like, I think, though, essentially what it's saying is that, like, what they did, whether completely destroying them or giving them as an offering, so to speak, it was done sort of in God's name, or like per his will or command or something like that. Which just kind of further drives home the earlier point that I was making. Anyway, then verse 8. Let's finish off this little section here. So we took the land of the 2 Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, all the way from the Arnon Gorge to Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is called Sirion by the Sidonians, and the Amorites called it Senir. We had now conquered all the cities on the plateau, and all Gilead and Bashan, as far as the towns of Salika and Edrei, which were part of Og's kingdom in Bashan. King Og of Bashan was the last survivor of the giant Rephaites. His bed was made of iron and was more than 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. It can be seen in the Ammonite city of Rabbah. So, King Og himself was actually like a giant of sorts. Which also, I kind of wonder if that adds a bit more context as well, because I think either later on in the Bible or maybe some like kind of assumed Jewish lore or something like that, that a lot of the giants were actually like spawned from basically a union, so to speak, to use a rather PG term, a union of human and angel, whether fallen angel or otherwise. This might also be a similar like backstory often attributed to the Nephilim, if and when you ever read about them. But with these giants being a sign of that kind of thing, which was also something God did not want. God did not want, mixing of humans and angels in that kind of way. That kind of almost gives all the more reason why some of these towns would have just been outright destroyed and all of the people killed. Because it was yet another sign of some sort of disobedience to God. Not necessarily on the part of humans this time, but perhaps even on the part of, like, some disobedient fallen angels. This footnote's probably just going to give the Hebrew units. So yeah, 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide was the size of King Bashan's bed. Or sorry, King Og's bed. King Og of Bashan. So, yeah. Large person. Very large. This is who they were conquering here. But anyway. Okay. Moving on. Yeah. Verse 12. When we took possession of this land, I gave to the tribes of Reuben and Gad the territory beyond Aroer along the Arnon Gorge, plus half of the hill country of Gilead with its towns. Then I gave the rest of Gilead and all of Bashan, Og's former kingdom, to the half-tribe of Manasseh. This entire Argob region of Bashan used to be known as the land of the Rephaites. Jair, a leader from the tribe of Manasseh, conquered the whole Argob region in Bashan, all the way to the border of the Geshurites and the Maacathites. Jair renamed this region after himself, calling it the towns of Jair, as it is still known today. Today, obviously, being when they would be reading this initially, not today. Anyway, I gave Gilead to the clan of Machir, but I also gave part of Gilead to the tribes of Reuben and Gad. The area I gave them extended from the middle of the Arnon Gorge in the south to the Jabbok River on the Ammonite frontier. They also received the Jordan Valley, all the way from the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea, with the Jordan River serving as the western boundary. To the east were the slopes of Pisgah. So, hold up. It said Arnon Gorge in the south, and then I would assume it mentioned the Jordan Valley, Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea. I'm just trying to think of the boundaries overall. Western boundary was the Jordan River. Of course, camera reflection stuff. This is my left hand here, but you're seeing it on the right. So, let me flip that. Western boundary. Jordan River. East were the slopes of Pisgah. South would have been the Arnon Gorge. And north maybe was the Jabbok River. But a lot of these probably have... that gorge and that river might have different names nowadays. Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea are still pretty recognizable. Even on more modern maps. But anyway, that was all the land that just went to 2.5 of the Israelite tribes. Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh. Footnotes. Okay, Hebrew says Havos Jair instead of the towns of Jair. Hebrew there's from Kinnereth to the Sea of the Arabah, the Salt Sea. So the Salt Sea would have also been another name for the Sea of the Arabah, which, again, being called the Salt Sea, yeah, that's very likely the Dead Sea. Dead Sea is very salty. And then I guess it said from Kinnereth instead of from the Sea of Galilee. But anyway. Then verse 18. At that time I gave this command to the tribes that would live east of the Jordan. Although the Lord your God has given you this land as your property, all your fighting men must cross the Jordan ahead of your Israelite relatives, armed and ready to assist them. Your wives, children, and numerous livestock, however, may stay behind in the towns I have given you. When the Lord has given security to the rest of the Israelites, as he has to you, and when they occupy the land the Lord your God is giving them across the Jordan River, then you may all return here to the land I have given you. So once again, just kind of restating the agreement that was made there. The fighting men would still have to help their fellow Israelites, take over and occupy the land that was promised to them. And if I recall correctly, Moses even went as far earlier as to say that if they didn't do that, then they weren't going to get the land that they wanted east of the Jordan here. That was just mentioned. They would get some other land in Canaan. Which, that might have also served as extra motivation for the other tribes to want to hold Reuben and Gad here accountable, and their tribes, because if the tribes of Reuben and Gad stay east of the Jordan and not in Canaan, then that means there's probably a bit more left for the other 9.5 tribes to occupy. But, so that was kind of the summary of all that stuff that had just happened east of the Jordan. And I seem to remember some of this stuff that we're about to read actually was mentioned before these events, but I could be wrong on that. Either way, doesn't really change the major point of what happened. So, let's continue on here. Verse 21. At that time I gave Joshua this charge. You have seen for yourself everything the Lord your God has done to these 2 kings. He will do the same to all the kingdoms on the west side of the Jordan. Do not be afraid of the nations there, for the Lord your God will fight for you. At that time I pleaded with the Lord and said, O sovereign Lord, you have only begun to show your greatness and the strength of your hand to me, your servant. Is there any God in heaven or on earth who can perform such great and mighty deeds as you do? Please let me cross the Jordan to see the wonderful land on the other side, the beautiful hill country, and the Lebanon mountains. Okay, so maybe this kind of pleading of Moses's to God happened after all this stuff because, he was starting to realize that, hey, there's good things happening here, and clearly it's only going to get even better, assuming the people continue to follow God. And maybe knowing that God had said he wouldn't cross the river and truly get to see and live in the promised land, Moses was just kind of almost begging God to change his mind. But then we get to verse 26. But the Lord was angry with me because of you, and he would not listen to me. That's enough, he declared. Speak of it no more. But go up to Pisgah Peak and look over the land in every direction. Take a good look, but you may not cross the Jordan River. Instead, commission Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, for he will lead the people across the Jordan. He will give them all the land you now see before you as their possession. So we stayed in the valley near Beth Peor. So, that kind of almost gives me further indication that this was, Moses kind of going back to God at a later time than this was initially established, and asking God to please let him go there, even though God had previously said, no, you can't, because you didn't follow my directions, when the people were begging for water. So God's like, no, I'm staying true to what I've said. You're not going to cross. You can go up to this, high place and get a broad overview of it, but you're not going to get to actually go there yourself. So, if you want to make sure that the rest of the people are in as good a position as possible to go there and continue following my, leading, might want to give Joshua a little pep talk here. Because he's the one that's going to go and actually lead them across the Jordan to the rest of the Promised Land. So I think that is pretty much going to end the sort of recap portion of Deuteronomy, before Moses then gets into the actual additional instructions, statements, encouragement, whatever else that he's going to say. So yeah, that does it for chapter 3. Alright, so we're just about done with the recap of prior events. But yeah, that's it for now. As always, like and share if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell to get updates when I post new videos. Look down in the description to get info on other social media pages and all that good stuff. And leave comments down below there with any thoughts you have. So that's going to do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video. But until then, stay cool, people.